I'm Jason Pettigrew, Editor-in-Chief of ALTPRESS magazine, and you're about to listen to Cautionary Tales and Lessons Learned, a podcast where musicians share their most engaging, illuminating, and sometimes horrifying experiences in the music industry. As you and I are hanging out, there are many young bands just starting who are getting together for fun, occasionally playing shows, only to arrive at the thought of, dudes, we could do great things, we could be as big as Breaking Benjamin. On this podcast, I'm hoping to give listeners, be they fans, musicians, or maybe just people who don't want to listen to the lore podcast, an inside look at the adventures the music business has in store for them. Deals are signed, money is exchanged, and, well, sometimes traps are set. The further and evident truth is that whether you are a young deer in the headlights or a grizzled veteran, you're never really ready for the rude awakening. I figured we'd start this series with Geoff Rickly, the frontman from respected post-hardcore unit Thursday, token American vocalist for British outfit No Devotion, and former director of the Collect Records label. His experiences in the record industry, as indie artist, major label acquisition, and label director, are somewhat similar to a 16-year-old going for his or her driving test and finding out it's 30 minutes of navigating serpentine steering, the day after you popped a shoulder out of its socket working at Sam's Club. I'm just glad Geoff dodged all the psychic landmines to still be around to talk to me.
Starting back here, if we rewind your mythology way back, you obviously come from a community of like-minded souls, which were essentially using Eyeball Records as the clubhouse.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the New Jersey scene, honestly, a lot of it can be traced back to that house. You don't just have bands that were on Eyeball like Thursday, United Nations, My Chemical Romance, stuff like that. You also have bands that hung around the house and would stay over and would come up with their names at the house. Gaslight Anthem, I remember Brian came up with that name while he was at the house. He had been calling it This Charming Man before Gaslight Anthem. And so I think, Gaslight Anthem, we were like, that's the name, not This Charming Man. Yeah, we get it, it's the Smiths, but not a weird name for a band. Don't do it. So I think there was it was a real clubhouse. It was a real crash pad for bands. It was the place where you could stay 20 minutes outside Manhattan for free. Alex was very generous that way. So,
And Eyeball released Thursday's first record, Waiting.
That's right, yeah. And actually...
Tell me something about, go ahead. Tell me something about, essentially what was happening culturally and maybe, do I want to use the term aesthetic zeitgeist? The reason why I say that is because it seems that to me, I think to me Thursday is emblematic of seemingly year one ground zero of post-hardcore. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you had you guys had arrived at that particular aesthetic at that time.
Yeah, I think there was certainly a movement before Thursday that we were influenced by, but I think the what came after Thursday was drastically different than what came before, and I think that at least feels to me like it's not an exaggeration. That's something that I can kind of look back now and say, yeah, that's true. Before us, there were bands like Quicksand, there were bands like Grade, but after us, there was sort of we had this idea, I guess, back then that was like, why not take mopey, goth music and smash it together with what we considered to be sort of the more underground hardcore of bands like You and I and Seisha, things that people call scrams, ironically. But we thought, why not add some of this melody to the chaos, and the chaos was definitely at the time, when you say aesthetic zeitgeist, the chaos was what was playing in my basement, 3 out of 7 nights a week. I was doing DIY shows. That's how I met Alex from Eyeball. Gabe from Midtown, and Cobra Starship was an early attendee of the basement shows. A lot of people don't realize he really had his finger on the pulse for a long time in the underground music world. And he brought Alex to the basement to see a bunch of bands. And Alex eventually saw our first show and pretty much on the spot said, you know, the stuff you recorded for your demo, I want to put it out as a 7-inch. And what most people won't know about that is that I didn't want to put out a 7-inch because I didn't think we would ever get a record deal. So the second he mentioned putting something out, I just started trying to convince him he should put out a whole album. And I don't think that was like an investment he was ready to make on us yet, but I kind of kept on pushing him until he really, it was like a whole album or nothing was kind of where I was getting at, because like I just wasn't convinced we'd ever get another chance. You know what I mean? Yeah, I certainly couldn't afford it on my own. So
nobody's in a band can actually afford to make records. Are you kidding? Come on, what is that? You know? So then, how did Thursday get the attention of Victory then?
So Alex had a close friend named Genevieve, who was a sales manager at Victory. And one thing you also have to know about like the whole New Jersey music scene and New York City, because Eyeball actually started in New York City on 14th Street. Vinny, who runs Generation Records for years, was Alex's partner until he signed Thursday, at which point Vinny said, I don't want to do this anymore if we're going to sign stuff like Thursday, which we're still friends and we laugh about now, because he missed out on us. He missed out on My Chemical Romance. You know, like that was the time at which if you had held on to your stake in the company, it would have started to really pay off. But, you know, he had brought in bands like Breakdown and H2O and stuff like that. So it was a very different aesthetic. And basically, you know, what you need to know is that Alex really, like, he was one of the most charming people you could ever meet. And he knew everybody, and other labels loved him. And it was just one of those things. You know what I mean? People looked to Eyeball to find bands. People looked to Alex to give them ideas. He just really, I just really can't say, except that people just wanted to be around him. You know, that was just kind of the way it was back then. There was really something happening in New Jersey. Bands would skip New York City to play New Brunswick. That happened all the time. I remember people would be like, why play New York? Which, you know, now you think about it and that seems crazy. But before the Strokes and the AES and all that stuff was going on, New York was dead for a few years. You know, there just wasn't a lot happening. So Genevieve was a friend of Alex's, and she heard Waiting, and she was like, this band is going to be bigger than any band in the scene. And I thought she was crazy, but I was very flattered. You know, she was like, because I was like, do you think we could ever like get a spot like opening for a band like Lifetime on tour? And Lifetime was coming to an end at the time, but they were our New Brunswick heroes, you know. And she was like, you're going to be so much bigger than Lifetime ever was. And I thought that was really rude of her to say. So she got us signed to Victory with Alex's help, actually. You know, so the idea of leaving the little indie for the bigger indie, it wasn't like an act of betrayal. It was like we were all in it together. It was kind of a little conspiracy to help the band out. But amazingly, after she signed us, she got fired. So we got signed to a label that nobody there had signed us, and nobody there wanted to take responsibility for us. And I wouldn't say that she got fired for signing us, but it doesn't seem like they were totally unrelated. We certainly didn't save her job. Let's put it that way.
Well, what do you mean, like right out of the box? It was just like, I mean, Thursday's career with Victory, Thursday's tenure with Victory was a slow burn, you're saying?
Oh, I mean, that's putting it really generously. So we had never met Tony, one, when we signed the contract. Two, the only thing that we negotiated to get in our contract was we wanted $2,000 to buy a van with. And we said, if you buy us a van, we'll like tour for a year nonstop. We're all going to drop out of school and do this, right? And so he was like, okay, I'll send over a contract writer. And the thing is, we had a quote-unquote lawyer, but he wasn't an entertainment lawyer. So he failed to mention that if we signed for the $2,000, we were actually giving away the publishing for that record, the next record, like 3 records or 5 records we were giving away our publishing for. Which, you know, $2,000 for even 1 record's worth of publishing is crazy, because you get paid on every record that gets pressed. You don't get paid on every record that sells. So already making one record is worth more than $2,000 as far as statutory royalties are concerned. So we were really like, we didn't know Tony. We signed away our publishing. You know, we really went into this blind. And as I went around meeting all the bands that would now be our label mates, all the Victory bands, they would laugh and say things like good luck, or ha, you're screwed, and stuff like that. Like, and I thought they were all hazing us. Like, oh, that's what you say to the new band. You like make fun of them and say like good luck. Like, I get it.
Okay. Wow. Okay. And then something happened. Your band got pretty damn big in the underground.
It was, but you have to think we were on the label a long time before, and we did. It was pretty overnight. It went from 0 to 60 in the span of 3 months, right? But it wasn't 3 months after the record came out. It was 6 months after the record came out. So like what nobody saw was us on the road for 6 months playing to like nobody and calling the label every day and being like, what should we do? And him being like, I don't care. You guys are done. Like, your record came out. It didn't sell. It's over. And like, also like, this is what happens when you hand in a record like Full Collapse with no singles on it. Like stuff like that. Like things like, yeah, well, what did you expect? It was a dumb record in the first place. And we were like, okay, but can we still have $1,000 to make a video? You know what I mean? Stuff like that. It was kind of like, please. Which, thank God, we made that video ourselves and figured out how to do it, because that video, Understanding in a Car Crash, became the thing that broke out like crazy. You know what I mean? It was. I remember when we sold 100,000 copies on an indie. I remember one of the Get Up kids said to me, "You guys went indie platinum. That's unheard of." And I was like, "Whoa, that's like as good as it gets. 100,000 records. You know, like that's incredible." And then we went on to sell 300,000 more on that record. So yeah, it was unheard of on a label like Victory at the time.
Wow. That is completely amazing.
Yeah, at the time, I mean, now, you know, a band can start out in a basement and have like a platinum song in like 3 weeks or whatever now. But back then it was just no way. Like, that doesn't happen. So it was cool. It was good for us. It was good for indie music. It was good for all the bands in the scene. You know, it allowed things like Taking Back Sunday going platinum on Victory. Yeah, it was really a moment in time for sure.
It seemed that it was such a. If it didn't happen as fast as everybody thought it did, mm-hmm. It still seemed like it was truly how it was a defining moment for this scene, not being just limited to New York, New Jersey. It would just seem like it was like a massive awareness, both, you know, about the band, but also aesthetically as well.
For sure.
Because I do remember the thing that was key about bands like Thursday and the stuff that was happening at the time was like, I think everybody was over the new metal headache.
Absolutely, you know? Yeah. But
I'm the meanest man in this room. Here's some turntable scratches. You know what I mean? It was just, everybody wanted something that was sincere, and something that was maybe, you know, wasn't all about like, you know, just being angry and mean and, you know, and all that stuff that, I don't know, dare I say, being manly. That type of vibe, it just seemed like it was so incredibly oppressive. And something like this, where a band like Thursday could be writing about more sincere, intellectual type things while still having, you know, a charging, vibrant music behind it. It was kind of, I mean, that's completely interesting from, you know, from just having what was happening at the time with the new metal thing.
I think
so that's kind of why.
You're absolutely right. And I also remember that my thoughts, right? Because I thought, you know, what we were doing, I looked at as a very fringe thing. But what I saw happening around me was, oh, people are so sick of new metal. They want pop again. So the next thing is going to be Saves the Day. It's going to be Get Up Kids. It's not going to have any heavy in it. Like, indie rock is here to destroy heavy completely, is what I thought. And when that started, I was like, okay, cool. I was right. I figured it out. When we blew up out of nowhere, I understood that there was a market for things that were a little more complex, you know, that it could still be aggressive. It could still have, you know, kick and power, and it could be unpredictable and chaotic without being tough. And I think that's what people were really sick of. They weren't sick of heavy music. they were sick of that like posturing of the tough guy thing. You know what I mean? That was what was so played out from nu metal in my mind. And I remember you knew us before we blew up, right, Jason? Like I remember talking to you before the success because we were both sort of cynical about what was going on too. I mean, you know, not that either of us is less cynical now, but but I kind of remember that sitting there and just like I think you maybe bought me a drink because it was like, yeah, nobody's here for you guys, but here, you guys are still good. I remember that sentiment coming from you.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, because I thought it was genuinely important what was happening at this time because there needed to be something because like the way nu metal, you know, completely crushed grunge / underground rock with some type of major visibility type thing. There needed to be something that would have to redress that balance as well. But the thing is that so now you've sold how many records? For Victory on that
yeah
release?
Like 400,000 yeah 400,000 copies
400,000 copies of a record on an indie label is pretty damn amazing. So it was just a matter of time until somebody from a major label was sniffing around.
That makes sense, but actually what we found out was that maybe instead of a label sniffing around us, they were sniffing around Victory to buy us directly from Victory without our involvement. This is the rumor that started to make its way through the music world, was that MCA was going to buy us and maybe a handful of other Victory bands, or possibly the whole label. That's what we kept hearing.
Oh, yeah, that was the whole thing. Yeah, Victory was going to be purchased by MCA. Which no longer exists.
Right.
That's why we've always used to call it Music Cemetery of America.
I was going to say, even back then, people called it the Music Cemetery of America.
Precisely. And, okay, and that was happening, but then at that point in time, Victory, the success of that record as well as other similarly sounding bands and just that community made Victory a powerhouse to the point
Absolutely.
where when the MCA deal went south, and they said, and Tony Brummel, the founder of Victory Records, said, "No, I don't want to be part of this. Here is your money back, everybody," because he said, "Here's your money back. Oh, I don't want any parts of it." And everybody thought that, you know, you got all the money, we're going to spend it. But he actually made that great move.
That was a brilliant move.
Here's your money.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So then, at that point in time, then you're still contracted to Victory, but that deal's off the table. But now Thursday or you know, the major labels want to smell your breath. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so we kind of thought, and maybe this is like I'm still trying to figure out if we were arrogant because you know, it's been a long time now, right? And I've looked back at the things that I hated about Victory, and I've also compared them with like the things about Victory that like that guy is devious and brilliant. Like him not taking the MCA deal and instead having like multi-platinum records with, you know, Hawthorne Heights and Day to Remember and all these bands that just sold and sold and sold. Like he's been vindicated in that decision, right? But I've tried to figure out, were we so arrogant that we thought because we became, you know, in the span of a couple months, we became the biggest band by a magnitude, you know, that we would get treated better, you know, that we would suddenly, you know, be respected and people would want to keep us and keep us happy. You know, that's kind of what we thought would happen. And if anything, it almost became like a us versus them, like the whole label suddenly treated us like we were sellouts on the label. And that was baffling to me, man. That was, I just couldn't understand how certain people would be like, oh, Thursday. It's like, wait, you guys helped us do this. What are you talking about? I thought we would all be psyched now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, oh, we have all this money thanks to you guys selling records.
Making us look stupid. Yeah. It's like, wait a second.
Yeah. Wow, that's some serious foot shooting right there.
That was tough. And certain things like the Thursday whoopee cushion and just, you know, they started taking the branding in a way that we felt really, I mean, hey, look, you got a band like Thursday, like we are so specific about what we want. You know what I mean? Like the point of view of the band is like we slave over it. You know, the art, we did I think we did almost 300 iterations of the artwork for War all the time. I mean, that's crazy, right? I mean, I can admit that's not healthy, but that being said, like, if all we want is to be involved in the marketing and to give it an aesthetic direction that says, hey, this is us, like, just let us take part. Don't make stuff that makes us look like a different band, and then when we say, hey, can we just tweak a few things, be like, you guys are the worst, you're sellouts, and you think you control us, and it's like, oh man, okay, what do we do?
That's insane. But there were some notions on your victory contract that were interesting. I don't know. I think it's a standard clause or something that if the band in a victory contract, and I'm not saying that this is. I've heard this. Mm-hmm. It's that clause where if the band wants to leave their contract, they have to go to a major label and not a lateral crab walk to another indie.
Right.
And I think that, and this is just the way I'm thinking, is the rationale means, because back in those days, if you go to the major label, if you come from the community, the same type of underground indie rock community that you're from, going to a major label is considered selling out to the man.
Yeah.
Where are your principles? You are hateful. You've sold us out. We hate you. And therefore, that would impact your success on the major label, because everybody would somehow think that because you want to look for other opportunities to get your music out there, that you've somehow turned your back on them philosophically. And I think that was kind of an interesting psychiatry that people who run record labels would actually apply to a band's fans.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you have to think at the time that people would say you were a sellout for going to Victory, because Victory was an indie major, they would say at the time. And so imagine what you would get if you really went to a major, right? It's like you're just not even part of the world anymore. You know what I mean? You don't exist. You're gone. See you later. Was sort of the thinking. So I think you're right. I think what happened there was a failure of imagination on Victory's lawyers' parts at the time to say, eventually a band's going to come along that thinks differently than all these bands and wants to jump, or eventually they're going to get pushed to jump, or eventually, it's just, they just didn't see what was around the bend culturally, you know what I mean? Because not long after we blew up, it was just expected that, you were a punk band playing in the basement, but you wanted to be on the biggest label. You wanted to have hits. You used to say things, defiantly, like, we like pop. You know what I mean? That was like a thing. I remember seeing every band opening for us for a while. They'd be like, we don't care. We love pop. And it's like, yeah, everybody loves pop. That's why it's called pop, dude. There's nothing radical about that, but okay. I just don't think people in the underground saw that coming. You know what I mean? So it was the one little strange loophole. And the other thing that I found really interesting was that the way that it was written didn't specify what label. It didn't specify under what terms or how much. So there was the idea, you could even maybe leave for a major label for not very much money if you were able to argue that clause correctly. I know that stuff has all been closed up in the meantime, but I found that really interesting too. Just the things that people don't think of at the time. And actually, some of this may be verging on stuff that I'm not supposed to talk about. The specifics of their legal contracts. So maybe I should walk over to a different part. Anyway.
Okay, so there's still a statute of limitations in discussing this stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
Obviously, you signed to Island Def Jam.
That's right. Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
Island Def Jam.
And then so now you're dealing with a whole different rat race here in terms of expectation, demands, things that bands who are signed to the label do.
Right.
And coming from where you're from, and how you've done things, and how you've operated, and how you've just been operating previously with the high-profile indie label. Mm-hmm. Is it what's the old line? just when I thought I was ahead of the rat race, along came faster rats.
Yeah, sure.
In this case now, I'm thinking, is it like just when I thought I was, just when I thought I was out of the shark tank, somebody pulled the ladder out of the tank.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Sharknado 5.
So,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So was it Sharknado 5, or were things good for a while, or was everything like, oh my God, are you kidding? I mean, were there things? I'm sure there were lots of things that you had not, when I mean Thursday, collectively had not thought of about what you were getting into when you decided to go to the big leagues.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think our perception of it at the time was one thing, but in retrospect, it's another thing. And I remember I heard this quote the other day that said, there's the known unknowns, and then there's the unknown unknowns. But what gets you is the stuff that you're sure of that just isn't true. And man,
discuss.
That is the sort of like that's just the whole kit and caboodle of us and Island Records, because when we went to Island, once we kind of put out that letter that said we're leaving Victory, we don't care what anybody thinks of us. This is not, this isn't what you guys are, this isn't worth glorifying here, this indie. We're not into it. We did this whole public thing. So, all of a sudden out of the just out of the rafters, whatever you want to call it, like all the major labels came to us. And we liked Island Def Jam the most for a bunch of reasons, but mostly because they had been talking to us for years and just kind of saying, yeah, you guys are great. We'll put you on the show sometime. And they were just the only ones that seemed like they got us before we sold records. I remember the first time the A&R dude from Island saw us, we were one of 4 on a show in the Wetlands that had like 30 people. And he still thought we were amazing, which, that says a lot, because I think nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd, right? So we had all these offers, and the Island one wasn't even financially the best. There were some bigger offers. But Island was the one that consistently, when we went in, they respected what we were doing. They understood what made the band important. They understood that, like, the message in the music and the way that we conducted ourselves was all of the appeal. That we didn't write hooks. We weren't like going to be the next Fall Out Boy. They got where we were coming from, and I think so. We were like, awesome. We don't know what it's like to feel understood. So this is great already. Like, just having them know what we're into and have meetings to talk about the Dove and how the Dove is like this strong icon that we can use in marketing the band, and how like tone and like message is more important for our singles than the hook. Just all these things that to us we were like, we thought it was self-evident, but even the indie label didn't get it. So we were like, oh, okay, cool, they get it. And the first year on Island, signing, making the record, putting the record out was like a dream come true. When I read like our Spin cover story, and Leor is saying, the guy who famously runs Island Def Jam and is in, Kanye and Jay-Z songs, is saying, what do I think about Thursday? I think their feet don't touch the ground. You know what I mean? Like, wow, that's the president is saying that, like, we're amazing. You know what I mean? That we're not even human. And so that was, like, incredible. But what we didn't realize was when you sign to a major label, you sign to the major label world, because they don't hold a staff for longer than a record cycle half the time. And they all rotate, staff. And so you end up, we ended up on, after one record and a second single not even being pushed, we were on basically Elektra under the name of Island Def Jam with L.A. Reid, from The Voice, and all these other people who just didn't give a shit about, they didn't care one iota about our philosophy or our Dove, or the fact that, like, our first single had like a body dysmorphia thing in it. Like, nobody cared. That wasn't important. You know what I mean? And our champions had all laughed us. So it was funny because we were sure we had it made from then on. We were like, if we don't hit big on War at the time, we at least have a long career of, being understood and making art. And, that was all to change very quickly.
Were there any other type of, I guess for lack of a better term, horror stories that you had to endure, like having to tour with bands that had absolutely no idea what you were about or even had any type of aesthetic consideration? But I just remember hearing all these stories about in the '70s about bands who had absolutely nothing to do with each other. Like you'd get some weird glam band opening for Leonard Skinner or something like that. Was there any type of things that you had to do, that Thursday had to do, in order to promote the record in some way, shape, or form?
At that time, we still had enough clout, because almost 500,000 records, it still put you in a place back then where you were better than 80% of the major label bands. They had like 5, 100 million selling bands, and then all the rest of them could barely crack 1,000 records. You know what I mean? That's how the major label world used to be. So we were in that middle ground where we had like autonomy, and we were allowed to do whatever we wanted. Believe it or not, it wasn't until, later on when we went to an indie again, when we went to Epitaph, that we found ourselves on tours that didn't make any sense because we were just trying to stay current, And so for me, I think probably the biggest misstep we've ever done touring-wise was not seeing the changing of the guard that was happening around us. And we did that Taste of Chaos tour that was us as the headliner, or, I'll put headliner in quotes because the main support band was destroying us every night. They were outdrawing us by 5 or 6 times the amount of people. And then those kids weren't even staying because they didn't realize Thursday was a band and not the day of the week, even though obviously the show mostly wasn't on Thursdays. It was on, Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Saturdays and Sundays. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I would be like, hey, we're playing after this, to kids leaving, and they'd be like, who? And I'd be like, Thursday, and they're like, that's the day of the week, right? And I'm like, it's fucking Saturday. But
wait a second. At this point in time, there are people going to the show that do not know
Right.
that Thursday is the name of a band.
Yeah, or that we were headlining or anything like that.
Is
They
that
had
what
no idea.
they were going to see?
So it was Bring Me the Horizon.
They were going to see Bring Me the Horizon.
And it was 4 Years Strong, and it was Pierce the Veil. And I have friends in all those bands. But I will say that I didn't see the kind of turn that the scene was taking then, which is 2008, 2009. I was far enough removed from it, trying to live my own life and make my own art, and just, not going out all the time, not reading, just not really keeping up. And so the sort of neon fluorescent T-shirts with zombies eating brains on them, and kind of like some of the stuff, like the really aggressive, image-based stuff, where the singer's got to be like really good looking or whatever. Like some of that stuff I was so out of touch with that when we got asked to do the tour, I didn't even realize how ill-suited we were for it until I think it was maybe the second show, when I realized that the first show wasn't a fluke and that it was going to be like that every night. And we had 3 months more to go, that I was like, oh no. Oh, what have we done? Like 3 months of this, I don't know if I can handle it, And we did stuff on that tour, Jason. I don't know if you remember, but there was the tour was sponsored by Denny's. Do you remember any of this?
Oh, gee, I don't remember that. So
there were meet and greets at Denny's afterwards, and they had a late night menu where we got to pick the name, of a dish, like standing on the edge of ham and eggs or whatever it could be, like eggs over the grill or whatever, like something, I don't remember what our dish was named, but I do remember that after the second one we did, I had this crushing sense of being a clown. So I started just going in my pajamas and trying to hope nobody would see me. That was super, super demoralizing, and probably that was probably the beginning of the end for the band, I'd say. By then I had already kind of checked out, how can I be here doing this with my friends, but also pretend I'm somewhere else, not here, and that I'm not singing songs that I care about. I'm just performing. It was kind of like that.
Was there a point where you were hating all of the stuff outside of that, and then basically blaming it on the music and your bandmates? Because that's a very popular thing with bands. They release they they have a career, and like maybe they make their big great art statements on their first 3 records, or their first 2 records, or something. And then when they make the ones that maybe don't resonate with fans, or they don't really move anything forward with the band's career or anything like that, they do things like, it would be the equivalent of you saying to an interviewer, "I have absolutely no interest in playing Understanding in a Car Crash for the rest of my life."
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, where you start blaming the music, or you start blaming your bandmates for that type of stuff, simply as a reaction to the way things are now,
right,
that you have really no control over.
Wow, that is. I'd say in some ways I definitely did. I never got to the like blaming our old music. I certainly blamed all the bands that ripped off all our old music. But I also blame my bandmates for not seeing some of my vision for where we should go after War All the Time. I basically, if I had it my way, the next Thursday record would have been the first United Nations record, basically. It would have been so heavy and so fast and so blistering and so different that it would have, like, snapped everybody's heads. You know, like, people would have been like, what is that? And that's why City by the Light Divided is called The City by the Light Divided. It's like, you know, it's about the internal split in the band. Because I kind of, when I heard the finished record, I was like, oh, this is like 2 records. There's like, you know, 3 songs that are the way I wanted to make them, and then the rest of them are the way you guys wanted to make them. So, like, I saw this kind of division opening up in the band. And
was it just you on one side and everybody else on the other, or were there lines of demarcation drawn? Or?
Probably, although it was more of a, like, every day, it would sort of swing over towards me a little bit, and then everybody would kind of sort of doubt it, and then, you know, it was sort of more fluid than the strict lines of demarcation. And I also, I think, felt really sort of betrayed that I had this vision for the band up through War All the Time that had been, like, you know, insanely, you know, it had been this vision that had, like, that people had gravitated towards, and, like, it had brought us a lot of success. And so I think I felt really hurt and betrayed that the guys didn't trust me with what I wanted to do next. And I think, like, rather than just accepting that that's the nature of making art, I think I probably let it get personal and, like, sort of resented them for not getting it. And then when I would hear other people be like, this record's weird, it's not even heavy, it's not even this, I'd think to myself, see, all our fans would get it, but the band doesn't even get it. And, like, that's the kind of, like, I think really, if anything, buried the band. It was me thinking that way, not the change in music. You know, we just needed to find a way to get all on the same page no matter what we were doing. And that was something that would be tricky until our last record, you know. So through City by the Light Divided, through Common Existence, through some of the other stuff we were doing on the side, there was always this tension about who was going to win, you know, who was going to get their way in the end product of the record. And then our last record, I completely gave up trying to shape it and just said, you guys just write some music and I'll figure out what to sing over it. And actually just, like, giving away that control and letting them kind of be spontaneous, I think did so much for us just in the fact that we weren't fighting about it. So I think that record's a lot better than some of the other ones because it has, like, a sort of freer, lighter feeling to it. Like, it's just got a little less, it's not as tough to hear things clashing with each other on it. I still think that Unified Thursday is the best Thursday, and I think when we all had, like, you know, Full Collapse was, like, all of us had that vision together. You know, I had kind of, like, told them what I thought the world was coming to, basically, and they agreed that we should all get on that. You know, I think there's power in that. And War All the Time, I had that title the moment we started writing the record. I said, guys, it's called this. Write that record for me. You know what I mean? Like I had titles and I had themes, and I said, write me this record, guys. It has to sound like this. And I think that, you know, that was like a real powerful thing when we were super unified and we were all driving in the same direction. So yeah, so I love No Devolution, but still, to me, you put Full Collapse and War All the Time back to back, and that's the core of what Thursday is. Those two records, that's our band, in my opinion.
It's interesting to point out that after I guess Thursday was said that Island Def Jam said that they didn't need Thursdays. How do I want to phrase this? They didn't need Thursday's input to their roster anymore. You're free from the label, and I believe that when that news was made public, somebody from Victory Records called up your manager. I believe it was at South by Southwest, and somebody said, "We will fly down there to Austin tomorrow to chat with you about doing something with Thursday."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you may remember some of the details better than I do. I remember them saying, "Well, obviously come back to Victory now, and we'll show the world that we're better than a major label." And I had to laugh to myself because that's the smartest thing they could do, right? Like, if they could make this next record bigger than War All the Time, then they win. You know what I mean? Like, that's a giant victory, you know, like literally. So I couldn't help but appreciate how smart that was. And I also realized that for us, just from a popularity standpoint, it was probably the smartest thing we could do. But this is the thing, is that like, then it would just show people that it was literally just like all bullshit, and that we were, you know, we didn't give a shit, and the whole thing had been a manipulation to get out of our Victory contract so that we could be on a major label. So I kind of loved the position it put us in, because we had to decide what we were made of together. And we decided, no, we're not going to re-sign to the label. But our lawyer pointed out, you know, he still has control over the publishing of Full Collapse, which is like your classic record. You know, while he's feeling generous, why don't we get him to let you do a live record with those songs, since it's the only time you'll ever be allowed to do that again. So we were like, yeah, live records don't really thrill us, but we want to do, you know, we'd like to do a short movie about the band. You know, we have filmmakers in the band. We may as well take advantage of that. And and so we ended up very carefully negotiating a deal to use the songs that they had publishing too, and in return give them a movie plus some B-sides.
So then obviously the band ended up on Epitaph, which a lot of people say is very much it's that label is very much an artist's sanctuary, having an understanding where the band was from, where they came from, you know, essentially, you know, having an understanding of punk rock, and also with the adjunct label Anti, where they've got people, you know, like Tom Waits on there. And it just, but at that point in time, while those records, you know, I really like those records, I think Turnpike Divides is right up there. That song Turnpike Divides is up there with some of your greatest tracks. Yeah. At that point in time, you felt like this band has already run its course. I guess, straight up, what killed Thursday then? Did they kill themselves? Did the industry kill it? Essentially, what was it?
You know, I think there's a lot of stuff in there at the end that we haven't covered. There's, you know, drugs, and there's rehab stints, and there's, you know, hospital visits, and there's, you know, people leaving the band, people coming back to the band, people, you know, because we were touring more than 10 months a year for 15 years. And the year that War All the Time came out, we had 7 days at home. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff. I think Thursday, ultimately, you'd have to say that we killed each other, we killed the band ourselves, but we had a lot of help along the way from the industry. We had a lot of help along the way from the press, you know, anointing us, you know, the biggest, best band ever to come, and then, you know, immediately about facing and saying that we're a bunch of idiots. I think there were a lot of things that we didn't weather well, but ultimately I think it's like you said, it's like the band kind of killed itself.
Is that kind of a cautionary tale in that bands, they like somebody will be listening to this, or they'll read somebody's blog about their time in the music industry or something like that. And if they're in a band with their buddies and they're making music in the garage and they go, oh, well, we know about this, we know what happened to that band, we know what happened to this band, we know what happened to that dude. But it won't happen to us, and they do the same type of thing, only with a new kind of hell at the other end.
Man, that is maybe the best question that I've never been asked before. And it's something I think about literally all the time. Because I remember somebody trying to give me advice once. It was actually Lior. He was trying to give me advice. And he said, well, if you don't think you know this and you don't think you know that, how are you going to get by? And I said, well, I just have to trust that we're going to be smarter than some of the other bands have gone down this path, and we'll make the right decision for us as it comes before us. And I think just saying at all, I think we're smarter than X, Y, and Z is like, that's how you make the mistake. Once you think that you're too smart to make the mistake, what you don't realize is like the labels are constantly evolving. The managers are evolving. They're learning not to make the same mistake either. They've got a new trap set. They've got new, it's like, it's such an easy, arrogant thing to think that you're just going to be smarter than that. But, nobody is. Everybody makes the same mistakes, So yeah, that's what the last song on No Devolution is called, Stay True, and it's a note that I wrote to Jeremy from Touche Amore about the kinds of stuff that's going to come up, and not to beat himself up over the failings that he sees in himself, because ultimately we all fail our ideals. That's kind of what ideals are there for, almost, is like to smash ourselves up against them like they're rocks, and we're waves bending around them. But yeah, I think yeah, the young bands that think they're no good. As soon as you think you know better, you're pretty much doomed.
Did it seem weird that you were a fulcrum of sorts within the My Chemical Romance team, just being friends with those people and things like that, and seeing the massive success and all of that stuff, and just kind of wondering like, well, how the hell did that happen? Was there any type of thing where like you were going through your own personal travails with this, Thursday was going through its own personal travails, and yet there were other people who were just kind of really like looking like they were doing great,
taking over the world
compared to the situation. Yeah, exactly. Was there? The question is not, were you jealous? Was it like, what the hell did they do that? You know what I mean? That they're not dealing with the same type of problems that we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Was it anything like that?
Well, especially since when they signed to Warner. So, for anybody that doesn't know, I produced the first My Chem. It came out on Eyeball. And then they signed to Warner Brothers before they found a lot of success. Thursday was sort of paving the way for major labels looking into the indies again. Thursday and bands like Taking Back Sunday. So,
because I do distinctly remember that they made a comment, My Chemical Romance made a comment like, we're signing to the major label because of this. And it was just kind of like, I likened that them, who really, they didn't have the big success at the time. They didn't have the major thing. It was kind of like the bag boy at the grocery store telling you he was going to be a president.
Right.
And you're just kind of like, shut up, dude. Don't put the canned goods on top of the eggs and just give me my groceries,
dude,
whatever.
Even as their producer,
and
I felt
yet
that way. Yeah.
I
mean,
and yet they go, and I mean, like they did it, and it's just kind of like, seemingly, how did they do that? Whereas, they weren't having the same problems that you faced, that Thursday faced when they were doing the major label thing. It seemed, it seemed weird. There had to have been some sort of weird type of cognitive dissonance happening.
Man. I mean, I remember when they signed, I thought, guys, like, you signed without having any real success of your own. Like, they're going to own you. You're never going to be able to say what you want to do. Like, you know what I mean? You're not going to get them to push you. You're not going to, when I heard the first single, which was I'm Not Okay, I said, like, guys, like, even this single is kind of like wimpy and weird. Like, I don't even like it that much. And they were like so hurt that I told them I didn't like I'm Not Okay. And then we didn't talk for a week, but they sent me the record and I put it on, and Helena, the first song, I was like, oh shit, why isn't this the single? Like, I remember thinking, why isn't this the single? This is the song. Like, and then thinking like, wow, this is actually like really, this is pretty great. And then I was like thinking like, it's a shame that the label probably doesn't really care about them because this song could be huge, And then when it started happening, it was so surreal because, yeah, there's this band that I like so condescendingly thought, I helped start them. Like, I know that they're, I know I've been down this road before. I know what's going on. And then like they just became so massive at the same time that Thursday was just kind of stalling and hitting walls and smashing itself up against the rocks of our ideals. And just, it was, it was weird. It was so weird. And like, I didn't really know what to make of it, like, I really didn't. I was sort of like, on the one hand, happy for them, and on the other hand, kind of like baffled as to, what was going on with Thursday, and trying to figure out like what did they do that we didn't do, and then at some point I kind of like was able to sort of sit down and look at it and be like, wow, they did a lot that we didn't do. They wrote these giant hooky songs. Like Gerard is sort of like, when he's not sort of hiding out in a in his house somewhere, he's actually like so charming and personable. Like there's a reason why I was so drawn to him, and he's like a superstar. You know what I mean? Like I was able to kind of objectively be like, oh yeah, all the stuff that Thursday said that we wouldn't be and that we wouldn't do, like My Chem is kind of done with like a little twist of sarcasm and a trace of their own uniqueness, and kind of put their spin on it in a way where they were like, this is what we wanted the whole time. And I was like, oh shit, okay, I guess that's, I said I didn't want it. They said they did want it. They got it. I didn't. We both got what we wanted. Like I should be happy.
Yeah, that's true. The band Thursday is back together. You're playing shows. You were, the last time we spoke for a piece on ALTPRESS.com, you were talking about exploring the friendships and being more cognizant of that stuff because of all that. In light of in light of everything that you've been through with these gentlemen, what are you going to do? What are you doing right now that's different from everything that we've just talked about for the last hour?
Well, I'm tending to the friendships more than I ever have. I'm also, we didn't really talk about this, but I'm also sober now, and that's a big change in my relationship with the guys, is that I'm like learning to, go through the actual steps of like appreciating people and telling them that I love them, and, tending things that I care about more carefully. And anything besides that, we've canceled some shows and stuff this year already because they weren't right for one of the guys. And I think really truly saying like, well, the fact that we still have a career at all is kind of like this amazing thing that we never banked on. The fact that people still care and they still come out and sell out shows, like, that's pretty amazing, So, like, let's do it the way that we always said we would do it, care about each other, and the rest, kind of leave to whatever, come what may, sort of. And, like, I think we always liked the idea that we did that as a band, and yet we got all caught up in stuff and put a plenty of things before each other. And so now, like, literally being like, yeah, we don't even have to talk about the band. It's not that important. Like, it's going, and it'll keep going as long as we take care of each other. So that's kind of where we're at. Like, I just went down to Tom's this last weekend and hung out with him and his kid, who's named after Tucker, our drummer. So, like, we got a whole little, it's like a real family type operation right now.
This is a kind of cliched question, and considering what we've been talking about, for just the travails and all of the things that happen involved with the band and the pitfalls and the craziness, and obviously the business model has changed. You know, we worry about streaming and you know, YouTube views and likes and followers and this stuff that's really got nothing to do with the stuff coming out of the speakers. And what type of advice could you possibly impart to some band right now who, hey, maybe they were listening to War all the time when they were 12 years old or something, or you know what I mean, or they are entrenched in their community's music scene. What can you tell them about managing their ambitions versus the real world?
Whew.
Is it something you would even? Is there something that you would even care to be detailed about? Simply because, like I said, it's a different model now than ever. But also the fact that you don't want to be the joy killer either.
Right,
you know what I mean? Turn back, go get your master's degree in high finance. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know what I mean? So I just kind of we all know that business and all the stuff around music has really nothing to do with the stuff coming out of the speakers, but that doesn't stop people from wanting to make their own, create their own art. But it's at the other end of it, what they do with it and what the expectation is from it. So I guess really is, what would you care to impart to people who think they have a vision for their art, or maybe they're unsure with it?
I guess probably the only thing that I think I've done right, for sure, in the ever-changing landscape of the music industry and the way people consume art, I guess I would just say that, when you're going and you're doing it, the one thing that you really got to tend and really look after is like your innocence as a musician, like the thing that made you love it in the first place, the thing that makes you truly enjoy it and makes you get excited and want to talk about it with people, that makes you, look forward to doing it and makes you want to tell all your friends about this great idea you had for a song or play it for them. Like, I think that's the one thing you can't allow to be taken from you, and I think like it can be taken from people not caring and you having to go on for years in obscurity, but it can much more easily be taken from like finding success and having people tell you you're great. And you start to believe how great you are and you let go of like the whole reason that you made music in the first place. And I just think that's the one thing, like no matter what changes in this industry, you just can't lose that, like that's the thing, like. And that's the reason why no matter what people say about people like Kanye West, like that dude knows that that's the only thing that really is ever going to make him happy, because that's, after all, that's the thing that makes us happy is the getting to make the art and getting to share the art. Like that's the whole fun of it, because like there's way better ways to get rich. Like you said, it's like do anything else, make some money, have a stable family, all that kind of stuff. But if you have to create, then you'd be stupid to let people's opinion of you change the way you love creating. That's my only advice, really.
Is that a forest for the trees type of commentary?
Maybe, yeah. It's so painfully
obvious,
yeah,
but
no,
it's not.
It's the thing that people, when they talk to me, they comment on, you're one of the only people that's been doing this, found success, and still loves it this much. And the fact that they constantly tell me that it's like, and ask me how I've held on to it, that makes me see that even though it seems like the most obvious thing to me that you have to hold on to, that people just forget about it. They just forget it's even important. It is so obvious that it's just like, they say, of course, instead of you're right. I have to be careful.
That sounds like a fine place to stop. Thank you very much, Geoff. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me so much. Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Thursday, still doing it because they can't do anything else.
That's right.
Indeed. Geoff Rickly, thank you so much.
Jason, thank you, my man.